A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El Hajj Mori Salah Khan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news. We advise you on what you can do about it. For today, we are pleased to be in conversation with a good brother out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Brother JAYLANI Hussein and I had the pleasure of each other's company last weekend, along with some other good folk in Minneapolis for the annual Family Support Conference of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. Now for a little background on our guest for today. JAYLANI Hussein previously served as CAIR-Minnesota's outreach director. He's also been employed as the community liaison officer at Metro State University and as a planner for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. He received conflict resolution training from Volunteers of America, and he's worked with at a juvenile treatment center. In 2013, he created ZILA Consultants to develop and offer cross-cultural training workshops on East African cultures. Brother JAYLANI has been active with a number of community organizations, including the Islamic Cultural Center of Minnesota on its board of directors, the Wilder Foundation Advisory Board, the Muslim Youth of Minnesota Advisory Board, the Islamic Resource Group Speakers Bureau, and the Araha Board of Directors. He has traveled to the Horn of Africa twice on behalf of Araha to open a regional field office and to oversee large-scale humanitarian projects during the Somali famine of 2011. Brother JAYLANI's family immigrated from Somalia to Minnesota in 1993. The brother is trilingual, fluent in Somali, Arabic, and English. He holds degrees in community development and city planning from St. Cloud State University and in political science from North Dakota State University. Alhamdulillah, he has a very impressive resume, and I'm glad to have him on board today for this very, very, very important conversation. But before we bring him on, there is a piece of video that I'd like for us to see, given where we are today. This is, we have just marked the 77th anniversary. It's a very dark and sorrowful anniversary of An-Nakba, the catastrophe visited upon our Palestinian brothers and sisters, a catastrophe that is still ongoing as we speak. So before Brother JAYLANI and I begin our conversation, I'd like for you to see a piece of video to remind us of where we are as a global community and the work that still needs to be done in order to bring about peace through justice in that tormented part of the world. Let's see that first piece of video, Brother Sadiq.
Donald Trump's tour of Riyadh, Abu Dhabi and Doha is not diplomacy. It is theater, staged in gold, fueled by greed and underwritten by betrayal. Trump, a man openly arming Israel as it reduces Gaza to rubble, is being celebrated, applauded, rewarded, and not with words, but with trillions. Trillions while children are starved and bombed in a closed-off strip of land just a few hundred miles away. Arab rulers are handing over fortunes and fawning in photo ops. Let's be clear, the Gulf has leverage, it has power, it has Trump's ear. But what did they do with it? Nothing. Not to stop the slaughter, not to ease the siege, not even to demand respect. In return, Trump gives Israel more bombs, more impunity, more green lights to kill. This was never about peace. At the core of Trump's Middle East vision is a single goal: erase Palestine, prop up dictators, and redraw the region in Israel's image. See this wonderful pen? My desk is the Middle East, and the top of the pen, that's Israel. That's not good, he once told reporters, lamenting Israel's size compared to its neighbors. To Trump, the Middle East is not a region of history or humanity. It is a marketplace, a weapons depot, a geopolitical ATM. And his ideology? It's simple. Arabs are chaos. Israel is order. Arabs are threats. Israel is civilized. It's not a worldview. It's a business model. Remember that $110 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia in 2017? Well, that was just the start. Now he wants more, $3 trillion more. He's already demanding that Saudi Arabia invests its entire GDP, $1 trillion, into the US economy. And they're offering $600 billion. He's not negotiating, he's extorting, and they're handing it over. The UAE's already pledged a $1.4 trillion investment deal. The race is on, not to stop a genocide, but to buy Trump's favor, showering him with wealth in return for nothing. The region is no longer treated as a region, it's a vault. Sovereignty? That's just another asset to be traded. Trump's offer is crude. Obey me and I'll protect you. Disobey me and I'll turn on you. For rulers terrified of their own people, of another Arab Spring, that's a tempting deal. They fear democracy more than they fear occupation, so they kneel. They make a pact with the devil. And what does this devil offer them in return? Arms, silence, a stage to pretend they matter while they're being used. Normalization with Israel? Okay. Submission to its supremacy? Done. Silence on Gaza? Guaranteed. This isn't a partnership, it's surrender. And Trump knows it. He respects one thing only, power. That's why he praises Putin. That's why he respects Erdogan. Like them or loathe them, they push back. They defend their nation's interests. Arab rulers, they just pay. And Trump laughs. King Salman wouldn't last 2 weeks without us, he said. And what did they do? They gave him more. But it's not just about US policy. It's about personal profit. Since leaving office, the Trump family has turned the Gulf into a gold mine. A hotel in Dubai, a tower in Jeddah, a golf resort in Qatar, crypto ventures, a private club in DC. This isn't diplomacy. It's plunder. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, already bagged $2 billion from the Saudis. And now Trump's being gifted a $400 million private jet from Qatar, a literal palace in the sky. And what was his response? It was a great gesture. But let's not forget we keep them safe. Without us, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar wouldn't exist. That's his thank you. And still, they keep giving. So ask yourself, what are they rewarding him for? For 100,000 tons of bombs dropped on Gaza? For backing ethnic cleansing openly, shamelessly? For empowering the likes of Smotrich and Netanyahu as they call for Gaza's population to be wiped out? For leading the most Zionist, most Islamophobic administration in US history? And still, they ask for nothing. They offer everything. But don't be fooled. They can act when they want to. Trump halted the bombing of Yemen under Saudi pressure. He made a deal with the Houthis. He even agreed to meet Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara at Saudi request. Sanctions, he considered lifting them. So, no president is beyond pressure. But for Gaza, silence. As Trump was being applauded in Riyadh, Israel was dropping US-made bombs on hospitals in Gaza. 9 bunker busters hit the European hospital in Khan Yunis. 35 dead, dozens wounded. Earlier, the Nasser medical complex was hit. Journalist Hassan Aslih died while lying in treatment. That same day, 56 Palestinians were killed, 50 of them in Jabalia, most of them children, and the applause continued. This week marks the anniversary of the Nakba, and here it is again, replayed once more, not through tanks alone, but through Arab complicity. The Strip is starving. UN food is gone. Hospitals are packed with skeletal infants losing their sight from malnutrition. Mothers faint from hunger. Meanwhile, Israeli ministers talk openly of removing Gaza's population, third countries, ethnic cleansing. And Trump, he offers cover, he offers bombs, and the Arab regimes offer him gold. While the rest of the world, Europe, China, Canada, Mexico, even Greenland, refuses to bow, Arab rulers kneel, open wallets, bent spines, empty hands, still mistaking humiliation for diplomacy, still hoping Trump might toss them a bone. But Trump doesn't toss bones, he tosses bills. No, this isn't real politics. This is a grotesque circus, decadent, deluded, disgraceful, with every check signed, every jet offered, every photo op beside the butcher of a people. Arab rulers do not secure history's respect. They seal their place in its sordid footnotes of shame.
My goodness, I have such admiration and respect and a lot of love for that sister. I always enjoy hearing her commentaries, even when they're on such disturbing issues as this. That little piece of commentary, that little piece of video, I should say, came to us courtesy of Middle East Eye and the speaker, the commentator, Sister Sumaya Ganushi. Again, I have a lot of love and respect for that sister. Let's take a commercial break, our first commercial break, Brother Sadiq, and then we will come back on the other side with our guests and begin our conversation, inshallah.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic Sharia and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
When you give water, you're reaching out to drought-affected areas, bringing them to life. Fresh water to drink, to clean, and to grow. That's the power of water. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
Hey Gulam.
Yeah?
Did I return your lawnmower last month?
No, bhai, you didn't.
Oh no. Now what'll I do? I wanted to borrow it again, man.
With Rendry Jewelers, you won't have to borrow or lend because the prices are so well trimmed on all gold and diamond jewelry. Alternatively, we could remake your old jewelry into a brilliant new design. Visit Rendry Jewelers at 151 Stevens Lamini Road, Musgrave, Durban. Rendry Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are going to be in conversation today, this afternoon in the United States, this evening in South Africa, in Johannesburg, with a good brother, a hard worker, for civil liberties, human rights out of the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, Brother JAYLANI Hussein. Without any further ado, let's welcome him on board. Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, alhamdulillah. Glad to have you with us on a first-time visit, inshallah ta'ala. Let's begin with some personal history, Aki, beyond what I've already shared about you. Who is JAYLANI Hussein, and what makes you who you are? Let's start there.
And first and foremost, Jazakallah khairan for the invitation. Thank you for having me, and it's good to be back, I think, on Salat Media. And most importantly, to all the listeners out there, I hope you're having a good day. And that's the world continues to have many challenges in all parts of the world. And so, I think in these conversations, just what remind and center us back on the fact that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control, the creator is in control. No matter what difficulties we face, we should always be optimistic on the next day, that the tomorrow should bring a better day. And to your reminder of the 77-year anniversary of the Nakba, and perhaps the worst Nakba that we're seeing today, I think even in the midst of this darkness day, I think the struggle, the genocide, what is happening in Gaza is also liberating many people across the world, and also bringing center to this particular attention. So to our brothers and sisters in Gaza, and for everyone who's listening, I hope that in the midst of difficulties, there's also ease. Thank you for having me again for the show, and I've always been a fan of the work that you have done, and glad that you were able to join us in Minnesota last week. Myself, I'm a son of Africa, and born and raised in Somalia. And just like many others, I've left Somalia because of the civil war, a civil war that was created by, I personally believe, the meddling of the United States in their foreign affairs to use Somalia and Ethiopia as a proxy war of the Cold War, something that many African countries dealt with. And the Jimmy Carter era used Somalia as a proxy, and eventually led to what we see today, the exodus and the war, and there's still the tension that exists in Somalia. But raised in Minnesota, and always been passionate about serving. This is something that I think we all embody in our teachings of our faith, but also at the same time, also, my parents have been a big inspiration for me, and their servitude, and today is serving the executive director of CAIR-Minnesota, among other things that I do. It's what we call a culmination of good parents and leaning into our faith, and being guided and principled to following the prophetic tradition.
When did you become the executive director of CAIR-Minnesota, and what led up to your decision to take up that challenge?
I was always part of CAIR one way or the other, and I was very close to the founders of CAIR-Minnesota, and so there was always some way of figuring out a way to get involved. And this is one of those jobs that it's more than a job. It's a commitment to servitude of the community, and there's a lot more that has to go into it. It's been challenging. So I came to CAIR in 2015. So it's been 10 years now. And those last 10 years felt like 20 years because of the challenges we faced. Now to be 2 Trump presidencies, and a horrible 4 years of President Obama, as Minnesota faced many challenges from the Obama administration. I think for me, sometimes we show up to these things, these jobs, and the jobs have impacted us, and definitely CAIR has had that. But for me, I've always been active and engaged in our community, different things, from humanitarian work that I've done, from community work that I've done, from youth support that I've done. So my engagement in getting involved in the community started much earlier on in my, I would say, sophomore year in college, in high school, actually, where I began to to lead Muslim youth leadership in Minnesota, and that continued on today.
It reminds me of an observation, a very memorable quote that I often reflect on. The words of Frederick Douglass. You know, a man is worked on by what he works on. He may carve out his circumstances, but his circumstances will carve him out as well. And on that note, well, my understanding is you are already with CAIR before you became the executive director, but you were kind of baptized in a well of fire into that position, brother, because there was a case that raged within your area. In fact, it was the case that first brought me to Minnesota. The case of a number of young brothers who were targeted. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, you know, that point when you became the executive director of CAIR, and the impact that case had on you and on the community at large. I mean, that was a huge case, and it was a very troubling case that it has so many it has so many dimensions to it. But let's talk about that, brother. This was when you came into the
so
and
at CAIR Minnesota, I mean, obviously, post 9/11, the United States has went through many stages of monitoring, surveilling the Muslim community in different ways. And so Minnesota faced in 2015 several things. One of the things that we faced was an issue that reoccurred, which was the young men trying to join, at the time, Al-Shabaab. And Al-Shabaab initially in Somalia is a terrorist organization today, but when it initially started, it was a fringe of the Islamic courts, who were the first group that liberated Somalia from the warlords after 20 plus years of civil war. And so the Bush administration ousted them on behalf of the CIA, who later now agreed that they made a mistake in addressing or allowing the Ethiopians to come in to dismantle what the CIA today claims to be a peaceful movement, but at that time used as a pretext to destroy that system. So in Minnesota, just like in any of the states, there's an effort to try to target the Muslim community, and I think you probably have talked about this in many times, but the recycling of old programs, COINTELPRO programs that are made to perpetuate a certain type of narrative. And so in Minnesota, we had, I think, 12 young men that were entrapped by law enforcement, a tool that law enforcement uses to be able to charge them for material support to terrorism. And what was interesting about that case is, while that case was exactly going on in Minnesota, a similar situation actually happened, or actually what would be considered to be a worse situation in Colorado, where three young girls, very similar situated, similar backgrounds, eventually actually took the bait of ISIS at the time, and on their own, no recruitment by FBI, no entrapment, they decided to go to Syria, and they were stopped in Germany, I believe. The parents reached out to the FBI. The FBI eventually stopped them before they were able to get into the hands of ISIS on their own accordance, their own money, their own way. And then when they were brought back, the prosecutors in Colorado, the same federal prosecutors under the same President Obama had a different way of approaching it compared to Minnesota, where you had a prosecutor who used an informant to get the information and to create the plot of young men trying to leave. And that prosecutor, he pretty much threw the book at them, charged them with the maximum possible charges. Where in Colorado, same prosecutor, the same system, and the same Obama decided to treat those three young women as victims of a global war on terror, and that they were victims of the radicalization that was happening by ISIS. And instead of charging them, provided support for them and their family to be able to deal with the aftermath of that decisions that they made. So in one hand, you have a prosecutor who looks at this particular issue as an issue of vulnerability to the community and figures out a way to support. And you have another prosecutor in the same system who we believe was trying to use this case to particularly build the political profile. And that was pretty evident in many different ways. And so that case, one of the challenges for many people who are unaware is that the American Muslim community, while very resilient and capable, in these particular situations, the community becomes extremely afraid, oftentimes refusing to acknowledge the rights that they have. People are afraid to even allow for the justice system to take place. And also, when these stories come up, they have indirect, and I would call it direct, but they would say indirect, but a direct consequence. They're overplayed in the media, over sensationalized, and they create a broad brush on the Muslim community. And they impact people who were never involved, never entrapped. So in Minnesota, we went from treating some of the challenges of the Muslim community, predominantly poor community, to Minneapolis, one of the largest school districts in Minnesota, which serves a very large, perhaps the largest Muslim population of students. Worked with the prosecutor of this case to propose a program. And you can actually find the audio of this presentation by the Minneapolis Public Schools, what we would consider to be a politically favorable school board and group, right? So this is not the conservative GOP party or Republican party that were pushing these ideas. It was actually the Democratic Party, who historically has supported the Muslim community, or appears to be supportive of the Muslim community in certain ways. And they proposed a plan. Their plan was to create a program at all the public schools. They would hire these specialized hallway monitors, or people who would surveil Muslim students during the lunch hour when they're playing with their friends and in the hallways. And they would look for signs, according to them, of disfranchisement or signs of religiosity. So technically, the Minneapolis Public School was going to create a surveillance program of Muslim kids on the basis of their religious and their existence. And that's something that the FBI was pushing. So they literally were taking directions from the FBI to create a surveillance program of Muslim kids. And they weren't even mincing words. They were so happy that they felt that this program would save these kids from joining terrorism, not knowing that the only case that we had at that time is a case that the FBI completely created with an informant and grabbed some kids and walked them during the line until they were eventually to be able to be charged with something. So, and that was actually a ripple effect. Then we saw the bullying that happened to Muslim kids, where Muslim kids were being called ISIS and being targeted with that. We had parents who were afraid. We had many programs that were created with that same mindset. Everything that was being done to support the community. If there was going to be a soccer program, it was no longer, let's do a soccer program to help the kids. It was a soccer program to stop them from becoming terrorists. And so the entire framing of the community was a community of a suspect. And that is exactly what these programs and what these efforts were supposed to do, to continue to further to otherize the Muslim community. And this is not new, and it fits the pattern of history that has happened in this country. The way Japanese Americans were treated during World War II, and many other things where people believed that somehow every Japanese American was a threat to America. And that was established through policy, through radio, through social media, but it was really done in a meaningful way to explain, not social media, but media and other formats that at the time. So 2015, I think we saw two things. One, an onslaught of a program that was impacting, but also a community that was afraid to speak up and challenge. And at CAIR, it was a very difficult time. I think we learned a lot from that time. But also just knowing how to recognize the historical context of that. And I remember attending a national conference at the time with leaders from across the US, discussing some of these programs and how to engage the government. And it was interesting how the historical balance of conversation shifted. So the immigrant Muslims would talk about the nuances and try to explain certain things and, try to understand something. And then the African-American imams, the indigenous African-American imams in the US would just say, no, we know exactly what this is. It's just COINTELPRO with lipstick, like we've seen this. Don't fall for it. Don't try to explain it, whitewash it, try to box it and rebox it. And I think that's the thing about no matter where injustice is happening, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in Somalia, whether it's in China, whether it's in America, if you really look at the patterns of behavior, oppression seems to have the same type of DNA. Yet people oftentimes forget that you need to have a historical context to be able to fight back against oppression. Oppression will reform. It will look different. It will be rebranded. It will be sold to the public as a thing that's a effort to help people. But that's exactly what happened generations ago. And generations ago, we learned those lessons. And if we don't apply them, we make the same mistakes once again.
For those who may not be in the know, the COINTELPRO reference that our brother made refers to the FBI's counterintelligence program that first came into existence in the early 1950s and took on a new and more urgent mandate in the 60s during one of the most turbulent decades in American history, when it was repackaged, or I should say, not so much repackaged, but reinvigorated to specifically address the African American human rights struggle. It was called the Civil Rights Struggle, the Black Protest Movement. Overall, I refer to it as the human rights struggle of African Americans, and it's a program that has been with us. It was a creation of the late J. Edgar Hoover, and it's been with us in many different formations, for many decades now.
And to your point.
Yes.
To your point, it targeted Dr. King. It targeted Malcolm X. It targeted any leader, white or black, that played any role in bringing forward civil rights legislation, civil right. And what it used were multiple layers of things. But what it was focused on was divide and conquer, create chaos, and also create fear in the community, that people would be afraid of speaking up the truth and organizing.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. And the program that you were referring to that formally came into existence during the Obama administration was the Countering Violent Extremism, CVE, program that was initiated as a targeting instrument for our communities.
And if I can stop, because I know sometimes in global conversation, CVE or countering violence extremism sounds like that's a good idea, and in general, it is a good idea. When people want to be able to do something nefarious. They don't use bad language. They use good language,
Right.
so that the overwhelming majority of people cannot challenge it. This was not a countering violence extremism program. This was to create division. This was to entrap. This was to create a community of suspect. And it did not make us less. It made us less safe, and it did not target the violent extremism that it aims to stop. So
That's right.
what it did instead is it created a, as we say, as a saying here in America, that it added more hay in a haystack. So if you had a bunch of hay and you were looking for a needle, if in order to get to the needle, you need less hay. But if you add more hay or more grass into a field, you're not going to find that needle. So it was a program that actually undermined any effort that would be legitimately to help our communities defend against violent extremism.
And this was something that I know from personal observation and experience was employed nationwide in communities large and small. I can't even begin to share, the width and breadth of American cities and states. Your brother Salah Khan went to the courthouses that I visited, north, south, east, and west, at the height of, the so-called counter-violent extremism program. In Minneapolis, the number of brothers that were part of the largest case. In fact, I believe it was that case that brought me back and forth on several occasions, and culminating in the trial that took place at the courthouse that I also attended. It was a number of brothers. How many were there, and what was the average age?
So these were young guys. These were young guys. These were in their early 20s. Most of them just regionally just finished high school. These were really just, some kids that hung out with each other. And the informant, based on the details of the case file, eventually really just drove them. They weren't kids who were planning trips. It was just kids that, if they had a leader, they would do anything pretty much. And that's typical for any youth, adolescents. And I've worked in juvenile treatment facilities. I've worked with kids who were court adjudicated for violence, and among other things. Youth at that age are very risk takers, and oftentimes they're and also one of the challenges that the model, so many models were created, or discussions around, what are the elements that would cause somebody to be more likely to join a terrorist organization. And one of the interesting thing is that there's no conclusion to any of them. So there this idea sometimes that these children are they come from broken homes, they have no money, they don't have a father figure in their life. No, that's actually not the case. All of these kids had pretty stable homes. Some of them have obviously different challenges, but they did not fit the profile that historically has been used as a tool to be able to address this idea of radicalization. But there are about, I believe, I don't have the final number, I think it was about 12 of them. I know 7 of them got shorter sentences. And I believe a few of them received the harshest sentence of 30 plus years, I think 3 of them. But what came out of the case, and this is the part that many people may not know, is that this case was also an effort to specifically target the Somali immigrant population. And we know that this is a target because, we had research that was done by the Brennan Center and others, and we knew that we're able to, these are civil rights focused centers, part of the New University. And their studies actually produce some things. And one of the unique things we've learned during that same time is that the FBI actually had specific programs targeting Somali Americans, a program called SCOT, SCOT, which stood for Somali Community Outreach Team. And these were individuals that worked for the FBI, who often are called the outreach team. They are not investigative. They're usually just telling people what the FBI does. They bring tables and they share pencils, and they're not the wing that is recruiting or doing anything to do with investigative aspect. But yet, in this particular the SCOT teams that targeted the Somali population in the United States were focused on investigative. So they knew that as long as they did not see a badge or did not look like an FBI agent, people would be comfortable. And this would be a way to ease them. So there are all these programs that were created to try to, and again, all of this is stemming from post 9/11 stigmatization and also, as we talked about earlier, history of how the United States has treated minorities, particularly through the COINTELPRO and many others. And so we faced that in 2015. It lasted. It continued to exist in many different formats. Those young men, many of them are out today, except the 3 that I believe are still incarcerated and for 30 plus years. And so this case, to some extent, I think for those who were aware of it at the initial onset, and now 10 years later, there's a lot more people that are, I would say, now have waken up to the reality of, what they did wrong. And especially those people who were involved who thought that this was somehow, the best thing, including, like Minneapolis Public School is not doing a surveillance program. They're probably not going to do a surveillance program, obviously. But at that time, it was extremely challenging because it wasn't the community that was being attacked by a entity. We were being attacked by everybody. Everybody believed that somehow that we were a community of suspect. We were going to be treated that way. Our children are a suspect. And that really created an environment where, like I said, your children could go to school and someone could be, somebody would call not 911, they would call the FBI on your child because your child today is wearing something that's very religious, and they don't realize that today is Ramadan, the beginning of Ramadan or Eid, but they don't have that context. Yeah. And so the FBI actually created a website called Don't Be a Puppet. And it was a website specifically targeted to educators, teachers, and to be able to spot any changes. Or if a child writes something about their homeland, the teacher would report them to the FBI. So I think that time was a very difficult time. And I think something that is different today is even the current FBI, as challenging as the Trump administration is, the current FBI has seen the kind of tentacles that could be used or weaponized, politically weaponized to some extent. And so, it's interesting when it's minority communities that are facing those same abuses, nobody's willing to lift a finger. But when there's a political party and their surrogates that are getting the same type of treatment, then all of a sudden the power bees are willing to look at it. And I know FBI Director Kash Patel and others are literally saying and speaking about it before he even became FBI Director about some of the challenges and issues that the Muslim community faced during 2015. And for those who would love to read more about this, there is an FBI agent. His name is Terry Aubrey. And I believe there's a movie coming out about his story, but he was one of those FBI agents used by the FBI to target our community. And out of grace of God, he made, his own epiphany and made a decision to leap and do the right thing, even though he was charged for saying and doing the right thing and protecting his nation and using good resources of the FBI to actually go against credible threat and not to waste federal resource dollars that could be going towards safety and actually going to go abuse and oppression of people. And there's an article about his story. It's a very long article. It's about 40 minutes long, but you could audio it. It's on New York Times, and it's called "How I Helped Destroy People." That's the title. How I Destroyed People.
That's a powerful title. Yes.
and he explains a little bit of what the FBI was doing, the way they were treating the Somali population in Minnesota, his efforts to try to be a good FBI agent who would use his resources and try to reach out to higher level leaders to be able to challenge the system. And he gives a very grim view of the FBI and the state of the FBI and their way of oppressing minorities and communities of color.
Brother, you and I were together last weekend at a Minneapolis hotel for the annual Family Support Conference of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. What are your thoughts on the work of this organization? You were there. You and I were there together. What are your thoughts on the work of this organization? How important is it in your view? And how impactful is it, in your opinion, on the families that have been impacted by this madness?
I think this is, I think for, again, speaking to a larger global audience, every time we speak to South Africa, and sometimes we have to contextualize some of this, and I appreciate you explaining COINTELPRO, but for most people, America is one of the number one country in the world today. Let's just say that for all purposes. It is the nation that behaves differently than all other First Nations. America has a history of incarcerating people in a way to control people. Incarceration in the United States is another form of control and dominance of a certain population over others. Incarceration and the criminal justice system in America, while better than most countries, we have to be fair, it's better, but America has a gap, a big hole in a gap. And that big hole in the gap is America criticizes everyone else for political prisons, political imprisonment. But the United States has also a version of that. And America also treats its prisoners perhaps worse than third world nation prisoners. Third world nation prisoners are oftentimes in bad conditions, not because the government doesn't have the money. The government has the money. It's because the government does not have the money. So they may not have good, adequate food because the nation doesn't have the resources to even feed its own self. So the conditions of the third world prison is there because of the third world environment. But the United States treats its prisoners harsher. They've historically used this as a system to oppress people of color, particularly Black men. It's a continuation of a very old system that was built on the KKK, that this idea that a Black man is a threat to society. And therefore, the criminal justice system has a two system, a system for perhaps sometimes women and children and white people, and a system specifically designed for young Black boys and Black men. And why do I say Black? Is because in America there is a history of that. It's not a new system. So anyone who fits that pattern will be treated into the Black criminal justice system, which is a system that's very crude. It's a system that does not have empathy, and it's also a system of guilty before proven innocent. Speaking of all of that, why is this organization important? It is because those who are imprisoned in the United States, first and foremost, are imprisoned in a way that they are supposed to be eliminated from the consciousness of society. Secondly, imprisonment with an added caveat of being identified as a potential terrorist or whatever, those caveats even create them to be untouchable, where people are in a position where they don't want to touch it. They feel that somehow that those individuals deserve no recourse at all, and that their statements and what they have done is horrible. And I will say probably the population in South Africa understands very well, because of the legacy of Mandela and others, that prisons are used in a way to almost stifle political speech to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent,
Mm-hmm.
but also most importantly, it is there in a way to benefit a certain class and group, and others can get away. In America, if you can hire the top attorneys, you will get a better outcome. If you cannot hire the top attorneys and you cannot get an attorney that you pay a lot of money for, the likelihood is the justice system just does not work for you. Public defenders in this country, who are the lawyers who represent those who cannot afford, it's not a conspiracy. It's just the reality. They just have used less resources. For every $10 that you even have for a private attorney, it's 30 cents for a public defender. And public defenders are serving 100 people versus a private who's probably only has 2 clients. So it's just a rigged system that does not allow a really clear, balanced way to deal with it. The other aspect that I think that many people should be aware of when it comes to CCF and just in nature is that families themselves are also put in a position where they're forced to almost forget about their loved one. In America, the prison systems, you can't make a call. It's the most expensive call. I mean, now there've been some reforms, but it is the most expensive call in America. You could call anywhere except the prison. And it's by design to make sure that you cannot communicate with your family. So families will accept the collect call, and the collect call from the prison is sometimes the most expensive collect call that anybody will ever make, and that's by design. It's a privatized military of these prisons. So to some extent, you need to have organizations of CSF that continue to challenge both legally, that continue to support the families, that continue to highlight the gaps in our policies and public and the way that certain people are being targeted. And it's interesting, it is these types of organizations that sadly 50 years or 30 years after their work, people reflect back and appreciate their work, not during the time they're actually doing it. They appreciate the work that they've done to be able to undermine. And one of the interesting things that I raised during the conference, and I know sometimes when I say these things, people can get a little bit of, their mind goes somewhere where I'm not wanting them to go. But it's a question of irony. The way that Trump presidency dealt with the January 6th rioters, who were all the ones who were found criminally responsible.
Yes.
The way he dealt with them,
Mm-hmm.
and his pardoning and his reasoning for being pardoned, and the process that they went through, rightfully or wrong, is something to show that political persecution, to them, that's their determination that it was political persecution, but they were able to see that does exist. Now, the interesting thing is that they're not going to look beyond January 6th, right? They're not going to look at January 6th as that. But again, the same thing. It shows that these discussions are being actually had. That when someone feels that they were persecuted for their political stands, that then there could potentially be a challenge for it. Where, before January 6th pardons, it would be harder for people to even to look at that from that perspective. And so, again, I'm optimistic in the sense that CCF and others will prevail. We've seen success with the work that they have done to be able to exonerate and reduce sentences. They have been able to help. They've been able to continue to keep the data on information on these families, to continue to support and letting these families know that they're not alone. They're part of a pattern of history that existed longer before them and will probably exist beyond them unless systemically there's a lot more done. But one thing I do call, and I will ask for our brothers and sisters in South Africa and Johannesburg and others, is that the civil rights movement in the United States benefited from the liberation of the African continent from colonialism. What do I mean by that? I mean, We need to have a very well connected human rights community. We need people to seek out injustices in lands that they don't occupy or they don't know nothing about, just to raise the name of those individuals. You know, George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd, we are actually at the anniversary here in next week of the murder of George Floyd. Is 5 years, and things have changed. Things have not changed. And one of the things that's very important is that the incident and the murder of George Floyd made George Floyd a victim of someone in South Africa, in Palestine, in China, in other parts of the world. People all over the world felt that George Floyd was a neighbor in their own community who was targeted. And so I know Haji Nori Salakani, he brings incredible stories, and and we can't catch all of them. You know, like there's so much injustice happening all over the world. There's the realities we just can't catch you. But when do you get the opportunity, like what's happening in Gaza and what's happening all over the world today to people in Sudan and other parts, we have to be global humanitarians. We all benefit when we're able to raise the flag of someone's cause. And it's a lot freer to do it in South Africa for someone in the United States. And that gives energy and life and blood to the movement and to the work. So celebrating and challenging and speaking up and raising the name of causes and issues that are happening in other parts of the world in your own community and educating them nets the struggles, but it also gives that community support. I mean, just imagine in Johannesburg, there's something important happening that people are gathering around. And somewhere in New York, there's a group that you've never met who are raising that same flag. You didn't ask them. You probably didn't even give them the full details, but they are part of the struggle for what's happening in Johannesburg. And that is what I call for. These conversations need to lead to some form of a personal change and personal responsibility to say, I'm not going to be able to solve all the problems. I'm not even able to solve the problems in my own neighborhood, but I'm going to use whatever little resource that I have and the mouth that God gave me, and maybe my pen and maybe my social media, to either share this message that's out here today, or as simple as something to say that I'm going to stand up with the flag. And here's the interesting, I share the story as well, because there's a lot of young people also say, well, what can I do? Like, what can I do? And the interesting thing is not what you can do, it's, are you willing to do something? What you can do can change. It changes day to day, but are you willing to do something? And I think Greta Thunberg is a great example. You know, most people know her now as this incredible climate justice speaker. People look out for her. She didn't start that way. She started by doing the easiest thing that even the local beggar does, which is get a sign, put your message on it, and sit down in front of some place where people can't ignore you.
As a young student, yes, indeed. As a young student.
Yes.
So, brother, subhanAllah, I knew that this hour was going to go fast. We are at the end of it. SubhanAllah, we're going to have you back, inshallah ta'ala. There was a piece of video that I wanted to share, but it's too late now. I want to end the program with a very important conclusion, inshallah ta'ala, given where we are in May 2025. But inshallah ta'ala, we are going to have you back. We have to have you back, brother. This is a conversation that must be continued, inshallah. With that said, this month of May 2025 marks a powerful convergence that social and politically conscious folk and wannabes should take to heart. It's the 77th anniversary of An-Nakba, the catastrophe visited upon our Palestinian brothers and sisters and their homeland by racist, hate-filled European invaders. And it also marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of one of the greatest, one of the most consequential revolutionaries produced on American soil in the 20th century. And that is none other than El Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, aka Malcolm X. It's the 100th anniversary of his birth. One of Malcolm's most famous quotes is the following. He said, "I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. And I'm for justice, no matter who it's for or against." Now, in this season of struggle, dear viewers and listeners and brothers and sisters, in this season of struggle, let us commit ourselves to this sterling action-oriented principle and do our part to bring about much needed positive change at home and abroad. As the Quran says, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they first change what is within themselves. This is a good note for us to end today's broadcast on. Along with this final note, I will be paying a visit to Charlotte, North Carolina this coming weekend, next weekend, inshallah ta'ala. There was a sister of our young sister, high school sister, who was brutally beaten by one of her fellow high school students, classmates, brutally beaten. And my understanding is the male who beat her is a football player. I mean, beat her so savagely she was hospitalized. And so there is a program that's going to be taking place in Charlotte, North Carolina, next Friday that I will be one of the speakers at. And this is a fundraising event for the family, for the young sister and her medical needs. So those of you in North Carolina, anywhere near Charlotte, it's been a while since I was last in that city. I hope to see you there. And inshallah ta'ala, may Allah ta'ala bless us with a very successful program. Earlier that day, I'm going to be the guest khatib at one of the centers for Jummah. So there's going to be 2 messages I'm going to be delivering, inshallah ta'ala, in my remarks next Friday in Charlotte, North Carolina. On that note, we close as we normally do each week with Surah Al-Asr, a very fitting reminder from the one who created us all. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wa tawassaw bil haqq. Wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.